Have you ever had something happen that seemed completely random, only to look back later and realize God was weaving every detail together for a greater purpose? Welcome to Where Is Your Voice Ministries, and I'm Erica, your host. Today, I want to share a personal testimony that reminded me of the promise in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. That God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. At first, this story didn't make any sense to me. It happened in layers, and with each layer, God revealed that what I thought was the whole story was only the beginning. I have three pets, two cats and one dog. One day, one of my cats suddenly became very sick out of nowhere. Instead of immediately rushing him to the vet, I decided to pray for him first. 2 days later, I walked into my prayer closet and found him lying directly under the cross I have hanging there. When I saw that, something stirred in my spirit. I thought, wow, God is going to heal him. For a short time, he actually started getting better. I was so relieved. But then, just a few days later, he took a turn for the worse. He stopped meowing. He became very thin. He looked dehydrated and barely had any energy. By the time I realized how serious it had become, it was too late in the evening to take him to the vet. So I drove to PetSmart, hoping I could find something to help him into the morning. While I was there, I walked past the adoption area and saw several kittens. As I watched them playing together, I found myself smiling and thinking, I forgot how much joy kittens bring. I really miss when my cats were that little and playful. I didn't think much of it at the time. I finished shopping and went back home. When I got back home, my cat looked even worse. My heart broke. I picked him up, carried him around the house, rubbed his back, and prayed over him with everything I had. At one point, tears were streaming down my face because I truly believed I might lose him. I cried out to God and placed him completely in His hands. The very next day, everything changed. He got better. His strength came back. His personality returned, and I never had to take him to the vet. I thought that was the testimony. I thought God was simply answering my prayer and healing my cat. But I had no idea that this was only the first layer of what God was doing. After my cat recovered, I couldn't stop thinking about those kittens I had seen at PetSmart. I started talking to my kids and said, I really miss having kittens in the house. Maybe we should go back and adopt the one I was playing with. So we went back, but when we got there, the kitten was gone. Someone had already adopted him. I remember thinking, oh man, we didn't give up. We started visiting different animal shelters, hoping to find another kitten. The problem was that it wasn't kitten season, so there were hardly any available. Our family had foster kittens before, but the organization we usually worked with only had bottle-fed kittens. My daughter loves fostering, but she wasn't comfortable caring for bottled babies. So I wanted to find kittens that would be a better fit for her. I ended up signing up with a different rescue. At first, they didn't have any kittens either. Then the very next day, I got a phone call. The woman on the phone said, guess what? We just got two kittens. Ironically, they were bottle fed kittens. Even though that wasn't our original plan, we decided to say yes anyway. We brought them home, and my kids immediately fell in love with them. The house felt alive again. They were laughing, playing, and completely obsessed with these tiny little kittens. Everything seemed normal. I went to church. When I got home, I went straight to my daughter's room because she was supposed to be cleaning it. As I walked in, I looked down and there was a note. I picked it up and I started reading. It was my daughter's goodbye letter. She wrote that she no longer wanted to live, and I could remember how my body reacted. My hands started shaking, my heart sank. I couldn't believe what I was reading. In that moment, everything changed. I immediately called 911 and my daughter was taken to a mental health facility. At the time, I couldn't understand why all these events had happened the way they did. I had no idea God was already putting pieces in place before I knew we would ever need them. My son and I got into the car and followed the ambulance to the hospital. The entire drive, I cried out to God. I wasn't praying quietly. I was praying with everything I had. I was crying, pleading, declaring God's promises over my daughter's life and speaking with the authority Jesus has given believers. I was praying for her protection, for her mind, and for God to intervene in a way that only He could. But I was also asking questions that so many parents ask in moments like this. God, how did I not see this? How did it get this bad? How could this be happening? Somewhere during the drive, I called my pastor. He prayed with me and said, when you get to the hospital, put your daughter on the phone. When we arrived, I did exactly that. He prayed over her, then we waited. What made the night even more confusing was that my daughter seemed okay. She was smiling, she was laughing, she was talking, she was watching television. Meanwhile, my son and I felt like our entire world had stopped. I remember wrapping myself in a hospital blanket because I felt like I was falling apart. My body felt numb. My mind wouldn't stop racing. I could barely process what was happening. I kept looking at my daughter, wondering how could she appear so calm while my heart felt completely shattered. We stayed there for hours. I think we arrived around 9 o'clock that night and didn't leave until nearly 5 o'clock the next morning. When we finally walked back into our house, everything was different. My daughter wasn't there. Instead, there were two tiny bottle fed kittens waiting for us. The very kittens I almost never got. The very kittens I wasn't planning to foster. The very kittens that at the same time I had no idea how to care for. My daughter had always been the one who knew what to do. Now she wasn't present. I was emotionally exhausted and barely functioning. Thankfully, my son immediately stepped in and went into action. At that moment, I still couldn't see it. I thought these kittens were just one more responsibility in the middle of one of the hardest nights of my life. I had no idea God was already using them for something far greater. The next morning, I woke up, walked into the room where the bottle fed kittens were. They were crying, and if you never heard bottle babies cry, they sound just like newborn infants. I immediately started pacing back and forth because I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't get them to latch onto the bottle, and all I kept thinking was, if I can't help these kittens, they're going to die. I seriously considered calling the rescue and saying, I'm so sorry, but I can't do this. You have to come get them. But then I felt prompt to do something simple. Go to TikTok. So I opened TikTok and I found a woman who had made a video showing exactly how to feed bottle fed kittens. I followed every step she demonstrated, and then they latched. The moment those tiny kittens began drinking, something happened inside of me. God spoke to my heart without saying a word. I remember thinking, if God cares enough about these two tiny kittens to make sure they ended up in a home where someone would learn how to feed them so they could live, doesn't He care even more about my daughter? Every time I watched those kittens latch onto that bottle, my faith grew. The fear didn't disappear overnight. I was still hurting, I was still crying, I was still praying. But every time I fed them, the peace of God would settle over me. It reminded me that just as those kittens had to stay connected in milk in order to live, we have to stay connected to our spiritual nourishment if we're going to make it through life's hardest seasons. So that's exactly what I did. I stayed connected. I kept praying. I kept going to church. I kept seeking God. Then one day, while I was in the shower, I started thinking about everything my daughter had been carrying and all the ways I felt I had missed the signs. At the same time, God brought conviction to my own heart. I had been battling addiction to vaping and using edibles. In that moment, I realized I couldn't keep looking anywhere else for peace. So I gathered everything together, walked outside, and threw it all in the trash and surrendered it to God. Then I went straight to church. From that point on, I stayed in church more consistently than ever before. Not long after, my daughter came home. We went to the same church where the pastor who had prayed with us was preaching. It happened to be spring break, and they invited the young people to share testimonies. Without anyone asking her, my daughter stood up on her own and shared what God had
Broke with
brought
a
her
suicide note,
through.
and basically what happened was my mom, she got home and she found it, right?
I just
And
sat there
I just
in
want to thank God that
amazement.
he wrote the note
The
in the
little
first place.
girl
Yeah,
I thought I was
not
going
weird
to
to say,
lose
but
was now standing in
now
church
I'm
giving
just
glory to
I'm getting the help
God.
I need.
Looking back now, I can see every layer. My cat getting sick led me to PetSmart. PetSmart made me think about getting another kitten. The kitten I wanted had already been adopted. That led us to bottle fed kittens. The bottle fed kittens became God's instrument of peace while my daughter was in the hospital. Watching them cling to that bottle reminded me to cling to Christ. That season drew me closer to God, gave me the strength to let go of my own addictions and deepen my family's faith. What looked like unrelated events were actually part of one story that only God would write. That's why Romans chapter 8 verse 28 means so much to me. God doesn't promise that every circumstance will feel good, but He does promise that He is able to work all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. Sometimes you won't understand what God is doing while you're living through it. But if you keep trusting Him, one day you'll look back and realize He was weaving every single layer together all along. So I want to leave you with a challenge. Take some time this week to look back over your life. Think about the prayers you prayed that seem unanswered. Think about the doors that closed. Think about the disappointments that felt like the end. Think about the moments when you wondered, God, where are you? Now ask yourself this question. Can I see where God was already working before I ever realized it? Sometimes what looked like delay was actually preparation. Sometimes what felt like rejection was God's protection. Sometimes the very thing that broke your heart became the thing that drew you closer to Him. If you can remember what God has already done, you'll have something to stand on the next time your faith is tested. I have to do this myself. Whenever my faith starts to feel weak, I intentionally remember the ways God has already carried me. I remember the prayers He answered, the doors He opened, the peace He gave me when nothing around me made sense, and the way He met me in some of the darkest moments of my life. That's why I can trust Him today. Not because I know what's coming next, but because I know the one who has been faithful every step of the way. When I look back at my daughter's story, what I share today is really only one chapter. If I went back another year, I can show you even more ways God was preparing me long before any of this happened. And maybe that's a testimony for another day. But for today, I want you to remember this: God is never late, He is never absent, and He is never wasting your pain. Even when you can't see it, He is weaving together a story that only He can write. So don't lose heart. Keep praying, keep trusting, keep staying connected to Him. Because one day you'll look back and realize that what felt like the end was actually the beginning of God working all things together for your good. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Has there ever been a time in your life when you look back and realize God was working behind the scenes all along? Share your testimony in the comments. You'll never
No,
know
I
who
really
needs
want to
to
hear the
read it
testimony, but I
today.
just want to also say
If
thank you,
this
Jesus.
message
Thank you,
encouraged you,
Jesus.
please
Thank you,
like this video,
Jesus. Thank
subscribe
you,
to the channel, and
Jesus.
share it with
Thank you,
someone who may
Jesus.
be in a season where nothing makes
Thank you,
sense.
Jesus. Thank you,
Sometimes one
Jesus.
testimony can
Yes,
restore
Lord. Thank
someone
you,
else's
God, all
hope.
the time.
And if you're in the middle
Thank
of
you,
your own
Jesus.
story right now, don't give up. Just because you can't see what God is doing doesn't mean He's not working. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Until next time, this is Where Is Your Voice, reminding you to keep seeking Jesus, keep standing on His word, and never lose hope because God is still writing your story.